Hey y'all, thanks for coming and supporting us Black designers doing our thing. My name's Kill and I'm an Afrofuturist metalsmith from West Philly. Today I want to talk with y'all about design for liberation and more specifically how design can influence our language of identity towards Black liberation. I started teaching myself metalsmithing through YouTube back in 2015 during the same time I was going to Drexel for product design. My work is centered around astro blackness and what it means to physically anoint the Black liberated self through adornment. Now, when I think about liberation, I think of how it's different from but related to decolonization. For this talk, I want to focus on liberation of Black identities, particularly in a way that decenters white supremacy. I also want this message to carry one of Black liberation being tied to the liberation of all people. Generally, human identities come from the spaces we inhabit, and these spaces appear through describing our race, class, and gender. My goal is to challenge the boundaries of the image formed by other people when we present ourselves. I believe this will help us be more to ourselves and our communities. To explain why I want to challenge these boundaries, I want to highlight what the concept of identity currently does for people. It anchors us in a core sense of self, it places us in categories and thus community with other people, and it constrains our perception of the world to the context that it inhabits. Now, I'm a Black, non binary, working class femme, and when I present myself to people through this identity, it speaks to some aspects of me, but not to all the personally important things I want you to know about me. I'm wondering, how can I tell you more through a different self proclaimed identity? I've been approaching that question by thinking about ways I can describe how I personally experience and value my time into my identity. Given that we all experience time differently, I figured that describing how we spend time through identity would highlight what makes us individuals. So remember how I said our identities come from the spaces we inhabit? Well, we not only inhabit space, but we inhabit time. And that context of time carries meaning that I think we can bring to the front of our identities by creating new language. Later, I'm going to show you how design plays into this. So we inhabit time in the past, present, and future. A lot of us are most strongly rooted to the present, but I think it's important to recognize how closely bound to the past and future we are. They are always less than nanoseconds away across all of our shared experiences. Now, seeing that those three time frames are so close to each other, we can start to imagine that they're infinitely close to the past and future, and that maybe we're so close that the past, present, and future are technically the same. I like to think of it as an infinite consciousness of self. Considering that this idea could allow us to identify with the past, present, and future at the same time, well, that makes me wonder, how can we more intentionally identify with who we are individually across our experience of time? I think we can do this through chosen pattern based identities. Patterns themselves function through a continuous relationship between space and time, and so do we. What are the patterns we can identify in ourselves, and how can we meaningfully present ourselves through them? This question is what my jewelry design is focused on. I started my Afrofuturistic jewelry brand, Black Margin, with the goal of exploring that question. I learned everything I know about working with metal through YouTube and experimentation, and in my learning, I felt guided by making carefully named jewelry that suggests expansive roles for what we recognize as patterns in ourselves. My jewelry is also meant to symbolize chosen identities that are in direct relation to a chosen community. In this picture, you can see folks wearing head crests, the first piece I made to physically represent these identities. With names like Dawnbringer and Deep Strider, I wanted to poetically name the kinds of people who would wear them. Those names are inspired by patterns of being that we recognize about ourselves in relation to our community. Are you the kind of person who dependably helps other people find their path in life and maybe also struggle with doing this for yourself? Then you might identify with the Pathfinder series of pieces and so on. This is my friend Lou, and a while back we got together to dream up a head crest that would be named after Lou's experiences through time. Lou's a root weaver. Throughout all their times, they found that what is common to them is the desire to work with the roots of others and weave them into comfort. Lou is also a massage therapist and poet. What I think is freeing about naming and describing ourselves in this way is that it opens us up to the possibilities of being more free in who we are over stretches of time. My big point is that I think there are time sensitive ways for designers to coax liberation through newly perceptive uses of language and the things we create. These uses of language have to purposefully honor the vast possibilities of who we can be for ourselves and our community. Ultimately, I think this will lead us to more properly interacting with and valuing each other's space and time. Now, I have my own vision of the future, and in my work, I try as best as I can to recognize and honor other people's visions too. I know that at the end of the day, just as we are a consensus of self over time, the future will be a consensus of our community and the identities that inhabit it over time. Our identities are our connections to community, and how we experience and acknowledge the past, present, and future in ourselves is directly linked to how our community will experience time. I want my community to be truly free, and so I strive to name identities that come from a place of freedom in my work. The thought I want to leave you with is this: if we don't have the language for something, we can hardly interact with it. And when we limit language, we limit ourselves. How can design influence our language of identity towards collective liberation? Let me know what you think. All that being said, thank you for taking this little space flight with me. Please follow me at Black Margin and check out my stuff at www.blackmargin.com. Enjoy the rest of your journey tonight. Thank you.